Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show. In this episode of The Short Box,
I think that the discussion around manga outselling American comics to the point that it is and has been for over 20 years is the distraction that indie comics needed to completely outpace DC and Marvel. But because it isn't like one publisher, it's millions of creators that are finding their space, and that slice of the pie taken by the indie community, it can't be quantified, so you can't make a pie chart out of it. So nobody realizes that indie comics is where it is at right now. You think comics are dying? Put that Marvel and DC book down and pick up an indie book written by a creator that you know and support them and break bread with them.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Short Box Podcast.
The Short Box Podcast is recorded live from Jacksonville, Florida.
Yo, Shortbox Nation, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 404. Thanks for joining us. If you're new, well, welcome to the show. This is the Shortbox Podcast, the comic book talk show that brings you the best conversations about comic books and pop culture inspired by comics. My name is Botter, and I'm doing special field journalism today. I'm in the field doing some reporting today. Obviously, I'm not recording this from the Shortbox HQ like normal. I'm actually out here at Cowabunga Comics in Green Cove Springs. And for anyone that doesn't quite get Florida or Northeast Florida geography, Green Cove is about, just a short 40-minute ride out from Jacksonville. Today, I'll be chatting with a Florida native that not only owns this shop, but he's also an established and known comic creator in his own right. Today, I'm happy to introduce you to Kyle Robert Willis. He's a comic and fine art artist that has quite frankly lived many lives, and he continues to wear a lot of different hats in the comic industry. He produces fine art prints. He owns this lovely shop that I'm sitting in, Cowabunga Comics in Green Cove Springs. He's a regular at all the Comic Cons worth going to. I mean, he's always set up. He's always selling art. He's got exclusive variants. He does a ton of whatnot shows. And most notably, by the time you hear this episode, he'll have completed a very successful Kickstarter for his new comic book. And as far as I understand it, his first creator-owned comic book, which is called The Adventures of Wyatt and Pouches, a Kickstarter that I personally backed. And I can't wait to have the book in my hand whenever it comes time for that fulfillment part. And you're in a lucky position, because even though the Kickstarter will be over by the time you hear this, there's going to be extra copies available for purchase. So overall, you're going to be in for a good conversation, and you'll have the opportunity to support a hardworking indie creator. I mean, what more could you really ask for? Without further ado, Shortbox Nation, let's welcome for the first time ever, and long overdue, quite honestly, long overdue for a neighbor, a Jax native and neighbor of mine. Let's welcome for the first time ever, Kyle Robert Willis to the show. Kyle, what up, man? Welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me. What an introduction.
You know, I try to impress, man, especially when it's the hometown peeps.
Even though we're not in the studios, it's quite the setup. It's almost intimidating. So,
Dude, the portable setup, you know, it comes in handy. I think the bar is set really high with the normal equipment and production I go for, but the portable stuff comes in handy, and it feels good to be in a comic shop recording a podcast.
well, if this is a milestone, I'm glad you achieve it here.
You know, I'm gonna let you have this milestone until I can prove otherwise, because the onus of proof is on me. The burden of proof is on me right now.
It is. So if there's a listener that knows otherwise, go ahead and chime in. Send an email.
I need my short box of story. Who do I say is my short box of story? And I'm gonna give a shout out to my man Jeff Fremid, who has kind of taken on the role as our unofficial historian. He's been doing the hard work of going back and listening to every episode of the podcast, and he'll send me occasional updates like, hey, just listen to episode 230. Funny how this ties back to episode 248. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
oh, wow.
Dude, wow. Yeah, so big shout outs to Jeff. But we're not here to talk about short box history, Kyle. We're here to talk about what you got going on with your Kickstarter. Because, Kyle, you're someone that I have known, I think it's safe to say, if you had to take a guess, how long have we known each other?
I'd say 9 years.
I was just about to say about 9
Maybe
years.
10, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've known you since
It wasn't
like the
long
early
after
days.
moving to Jacksonville.
When did you move to
became
Jax?
I moved here the day before Thanksgiving 2011.
Oh, wow, okay.
It was a memorable time in my life. So
Where'd you move from?
I came from South Florida. I was down in, right before I moved here, I was in Wilton Manor, which is a subset of Fort Lauderdale. I was living with my brother over there. I saw an internship to learn digital, graphic design and media, which brought me up here. And I was only slated to be here for 2 months, and I never left.
Yeah, I feel like Jax does that to folks, man.
Sucks them in.
Yeah, I think they realize, like, wow, this is really quaint. Like, this is really nice. Even though I hated how our tourism board, remember a couple years back, they had, did the rebrand for Jackson. I think
It's easier here?
It's easier here, which kind of pissed a couple of people off because they're like, it's not that easier, man. I think there was a lot of people our age and younger that felt like it made it seem like it was a retirement place. Like it wasn't, and everyone at the time was pushing for more creatives to move to Jax.
Like there's no hustling and it's all laid back.
Yeah, right.
Like you're already successful, and that's definitely not the case.
No, we work our asses off here. But I do kind of get where they were coming from. I think when people visit Jax, it's like, yo, we got everything. You want the beach? We got it. You want really great food? We've got it. Affordable housing? We got it. It's the South, baby. Welcome.
Anybody that thinks that this is a congested city has clearly never lived in either New York or Miami, or, it has the bonus here of being a metropolitan city without having the congestion that you'll see in Miami.
Yeah, yeah. And hearing, I didn't know about your graphic design background, but now it makes all the sense in the world. Because
I actually moved to Jacksonville to learn how to do post work for a 3D comic book firm. And it wasn't until after they lured me here that I realized it was a pornographic comic book firm. So I learned how to
bait
do
and switch, huh?
Yep. So I'm learning how to take, the rendered frames and add shadows and highlights and perspiration and other bodily fluids and stuff. And there was a clause that at the end of the 2 months when your training is complete, you can either stay on and they'll make you an offer, or you can go back where you came from and carry on with your life. And the latter was my original plan. And I met Beth on Plenty of Fish, of all places. And here we are, almost 12 years in.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And you were telling me that you just recently you're about to celebrate. Like, we are recording the day before you're celebrating the 2-year anniversary of opening Cowabunga Comics here in Green Cove Springs.
Yes, our grand opening was October 2nd, 2 years ago. So tomorrow will be our second anniversary here in our brick and mortar, which is crazy to me because I wasn't the kid who dreamed, I want to have a comic book shop one day. That quite literally just became a weird series of events, COVID included, that brought me to here. And it's been a hell of a 2 years, man.
That's cool. When I walked in, you were asking me, of all the things I've learned from the day I started podcasting till now. And, I was sharing some of that. I guess I want to turn the tables on you. And when you look at yourself now as on the retail side, being a comic shop owner, about to celebrate his 2-year anniversary, what's, how do you feel like how different do you feel from day one when you first started? Like, do you feel like you could run laps around day one Kyle here at Cowabunga, or do you feel like, I kind of want
I've got 2 years of empirical data in my brain that I didn't have 2 years ago. And I've seen other business owners struggle to adapt to their demographic when they open up a brick and mortar. Like, you remember Emerald Dragon Games? He opened that place, Mike, and he knew exactly what he was, and he knew exactly what he was going to be. And then the customers came in through the doors, and they showed him that, that's not what you're going to be. You're going to be a tabletop gaming place. You know what I mean? And he had to adapt or disappear. And he adapted, and he absorbed this body of folks that ended up becoming his regulars. And I did the same. I was like, okay, I'm going to have the homage section over here. This is going to be the area that's going to have all the comics that blow your mind and have controversy in them. And then the majority of the people coming through my doors were little kids, and the parents were like, what is that? There's a swastika on that comic book? There's a swamp thing with so I had to take those off of the wall and put them into a box. So we adapted and changed a lot in 2 years, but I've got a Google photo album of the place and its evolution over time. And there's people that they haven't been here in maybe only 6 months, and they come in, they're like, oh my God, there's so much more stuff. There's so much different stuff. And I just started carrying Pokemon, and it's way different.
Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show. You've also done a really good job of having an online presence for a shop. I think when I walked in, you were like, honestly, what did you say? You were like, I'm an online shop
that just happens to have a front door.
Door.
I think that's the artist in me, because no artist is going to make it in their local neighborhood or area. They're going to have to seek fans and followers elsewhere, because art and being successful at art is a numbers game. The more people you get, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So the more people that see your stuff, the more that whatever that percentage of the body of viewers is that's going to become a fan, they'll see your stuff. So I had that part of it figured out with being an artist, and that transcended. And when I started selling comic books, I started selling online only, and we graduated to the brick and mortar. So.
And when we talk online, we're talking you have an online store, but you really, I know when it comes to staying faithful and consistent with Whatnot, you're throwing Whatnot shows pretty consistently. I know, shout outs to Trey, friend of the show. I know he's done a couple of your Whatnot shows for you as well.
He
right?
runs 2 shows a week. We run 7 shows consistently every week. Jesse comes in and he runs daytime shows Monday through Friday, and then Trey is late night Friday and Saturday nights. So we used to do the Facebook Live. We started with Facebook Live, and once we realized how much time is saved selling on Whatnot as opposed to doing the online Facebook claim sales, it was a no-brainer for us to jump and change course. But it was my being an artist that got me on the Whatnot. The person who is now the head of Whatnot Comics, Jack DeMeo, reached out to me on Instagram with a message. Hey, long-time follower, first-time caller. I work for this new little startup called Whatnot. I'd like to see about getting you, onboarded onto the platform. I think it'd be a great place for you to find new viewers. And we did now people, when they onboard to the platform of Whatnot, there's like 50 people in a live stream or whatever, and being spoken to addressed like a class, but it was me one-on-one in an Instagram video chat with Jack. He was basically telling me how to navigate the website and got my seller account approved. And I went on and I did a couple of shows, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have any followers yet. I didn't make a ton of money. I sold a couple of originals for way less than I normally would have. And I kind of tucked it away in my back pocket and forgot about Whatnot. And it wasn't until after the store was open and a couple of my regulars were in here and they were looking at eBay listings, and they were talking about this book that was selling for $1,000, $3,000. And I'm like, what are you guys looking at? And they showed me, and it was the Whatnot exclusive Invincible #1. And there was a Virgin and Trade Dress set sold for like $3,000. And I was like, I remembered Whatnot sent me a copy of those two books for being one of the first 100 people to sell comics on the app. And I was like, I got those books in the back. And they're like, no, you don't.
You're like, yo, I've been sitting on a gold mine for months now.
Yeah, I do. So I went to the back and I grabbed them and I put it in their hands, and they kind of looked at me like they were shook, I was like, give me $600 for both of them. And they walked out of here with those two books like they had just robbed a bank. And to me, it was just like a thank you comic. It was a nothing comic a second ago.
You could hear them say, faintly in the distance, sucker.
Yeah. I was glad to be a sucker that day.
Yeah. You walked away with some money in your pocket. Hell yeah.
But at that time, it made me take a second look, like maybe this Whatnot thing, what's going on? And I took another look, and the person who actually runs Whatnot's official Discord channel lives in St. Augustine, and he walked into my shop, and I had just gotten a collection with a bunch of Spawn. So I let him do a pop-up show with Spawn books in my mailroom, and it did very well. In like an hour's worth of time, and I was like, "Yo, Trey, Jesse, y'all gotta figure out how to do this, man. Let's do it."
Yeah, you guys speak the language. I feel like Whatnot, especially, and you can say this about like going like live on Instagram or any other like platform. There's a certain language that you've got to speak that's a part of the platform. Like Whatnot is not the same as like how you would speak or address or do things on, say, like Instagram Live or Facebook Live.
Exactly.
Like Whatnot's got its own like quirks and nuances that are unique to that community. And when I started doing Whatnot shows, I was absorbing as much knowledge as I could from Trey. And I know that, he's passed that on and got stuff from you. So yeah, you guys do fantastic as far as online. I'm curious, do you think in this day and age that it's almost like essential for comic shop owners and folks that work in retail to be online in those spaces? Like, especially like Whatnot?
Whatnot is not for everyone. So no, I wouldn't say Whatnot exclusively, but the online area, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of comic shop owners don't mess with variants, and they feel that because they don't mess with, modern variants, they shouldn't be online. And that is definitely not the case. Even if you're only on eBay, you want to get online as a retailer. It's weird to me that just because you aren't great with technology, they got to find somebody, get them online, get them a website. You got stuff sitting on your back wall for 6 months. That's too long. Put it online.
Yeah, you're almost limiting. It feels like, tell me if I'm wrong, it feels like a backwards way of thinking now, where it's like you're waiting on someone to come into your shop. You're relying so heavily on foot traffic, returning customers, pull list customers, when you've got the whole world at your hands. Like you can literally sell to...
You're choosing to be the needle in the haystack instead of, jumping out and being, part of the forest and not just one of the trees.
That's something I talk to, like young or starting out podcasters at like these podcaster meetups I run. Is they'll ask like, hey, do I need to be on Apple or focus my efforts on Spotify? My advice is always go exactly wherever your listeners are. So be everywhere. But also, if you have a niche topic like comic books, for me, like I've always gone to where the listeners are. So my ideal listener is someone that goes to a comic shop. So I've got flyers at comic shops. It's someone that's going to be at conventions. So I'm going to go to conventions and host panels and push. Like you got to be where your customers are at. And now, and with the advancements in technology and how easy it is to just be online or have a marketplace online or online store, it just doesn't make sense to only think in like the brick and mortar terms.
For some people, it's the thought is so overwhelming that they don't know where to start. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a what they don't realize is you can open up a Shopify store, and then you can just use the widgets on Shopify, and you can have every single item. Say you only have 100 comics, that you only have time to put up 100 comics on your store, and then you can't do it until it makes a couple bucks for the business. You don't have any more time to devote to it. Put those 100 comics on your Shopify store, and then you can use their apps and widgets to push those items through to TikTok and to Facebook Marketplace and to, eBay. And there's an eBay sales channel. Now your stuff is live in 7 different places. So that's 100 listings. So that's 700 listings. Now you have 700 possibilities of making a sale. And when you make that sale, say you sell it on eBay, Shopify will automatically pull it out from all the other places that it's pushed through to,
that's cool.
and then you fulfill the order, and then you got maybe that $20 sale bought you 10 minutes to make a couple more listings, But because the whole thing, there's 7 different places that I have to put on my listings, and just like with podcasts, there's a lot of the iHeartRadio and all the different places, but then there's apps. I don't know the name of them. I'm sure you do, where you put your podcast on that app, and then it puts it through to everything else. Apple Podcast.
A podcast hosting service really is what you're talking about. That pushes everything out
for a nominal fee or whatever. Yeah.
But I like the point you're bringing up as far as like seeking ways to automate the process and make it easier on yourself. Because when you do think like granular like that, like, okay, I've got to have a presence here, here, and here, it does feel overwhelming, and you can't be perfect on everything or manage or have that much time. But when you start seeking out ways to automate things where you're like, maybe I'm going to spend more hours up front building out my process, trying things, failing, but the goal is to get it to where going forward, once I've invested that time, now all I need is an hour, and I can,
Sure,
I can hit all these spots and all that. You know what? There's a lot of cool stuff in here, and I do advise anyone, if you haven't been to Cowabunga Comics, I'll share just a quick little anecdote. My man Kyle had the first couple of issues of How to Do a Powerbomb, which I thought have just been sold out. I was like, Daniel Warren Johnson comics, if you didn't buy them when they came out, you're not finding those in the back issues. Kyle had a couple of issue number 1s for cover price. Just chilling. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. So
the thing that I'm most proud of in this store is our independent selection. I challenge you to find another comic shop in Florida with more indie books than I've got from local, because I came from Artist Alley. I was with these guys. I was brushing elbows with them. So when they got a comic on Kickstarter, I'm like, put the LCS tier up there so I can, double the price and I'll buy 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 copies off of you. So I've got all kinds of, local creators, from Travis Gibb to Austin Janowski to Jonathan Hedrick, David Byrne. I got all their books.
I've got Jonathan Hedrick on my list of reaching out when I've got time to get some more folks on. But yeah, you do a good job of spotlighting, other indie comic creators, local comic creators, because like you said, you're someone that I've watched go through the ranks.
I give those shout outs and I support these artists the way I wish somebody would have shouted me out and supported me when I was first starting out. And if they're putting in the work and they're made out of hustle butter, I'm gonna carry their book in my store. And if it's a great book, I'm gonna recommend it to every person that walks through the door.
Hell yeah. So speaking about hustle butter, which I'm going to add that to my lexicon. I mentioned in the intro that you live a lot of lives in the world of comics. I mentioned artist, comic shop owner, now, comic writer at this point. And I would say that you live in 2 worlds. Like, you live in the world of comics and art. Like, your home is both conventions and artist alley and in comic shops, but also at art markets. Like, I've seen you at art market, like events where specifically like, hey, buy local goods or buy art from like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just strictly art. And it is interesting that you can easily live in both worlds and how you've managed to leverage your artistic background to, succeed in the world of comics.
Well, you used a word I wouldn't have used, which was easily. But when I first moved to Jacksonville, I told you that internship that brought me here, I was only supposed to be here for 2 months. And once I started dating Beth, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to let go of her. So, and I realized I was stuck here. I reached out to every gallery and artist co-op and club and group that existed in Jacksonville, kind of with a, hey, I'm Kyle. I'm a new local artist, hoping that they would, hey, welcome me in or whatever. And the ones that even bothered to respond, it was like, this is how much it is to be a member. You know what I mean? Very cold, boilerplate response, canned response. And I was just like, what is this? So I made it my personal, when I had to learn how to dive into the local art scene, I made it my personal mission to try to make other people, to ease their transition to, hey, yeah, and you don't have to be a card carrying member of the art guild to set up an art wall. Come on down. And I would find them venues and stuff. But,
well, I want to know, like, what's your favorite hat that you wear? Is it artist? Is it shop owner? Is it the convention circuit? Or is it, working on
curator?
Comics? Curator. What does that mean? What does that mean in comics for you?
Well, 3 weekends ago when I had that event here, the squad takes over whatnot, and I had people fly in from all over. I curated who I brought the Comic Con to me.
Oh, cool.
But I got to choose who I wanted to be in the building, who I wanted to participate. So that way we were able to have 15 streamers here running shows for 4.5 days, all staying together under the roof at this place that I rented them a half a mile away from here. And it went off without a hitch, without incident.
So you like to be the Rick Rubin of comics.
Sure, I just have more than one post on Instagram.
Like artist jam sessions, you like to get artists together and help get in front of folks.
Sure. And I'll say yes to anything. If it's a new thing and it sounds wild and absurd and obscene, let's do it. I'll try it once. And that has helped me. And also working with as many people, that anybody that says, hey, you want to do something together? I'm going to, I wouldn't go, oh, how many followers do you have? Or how big of a fish are you? I'll work with you once, see how I like the cut of your jib. And if we work well together, then maybe in the future, but curator, I curated the collection of independent comic books that is in this place, the art from local artists. We got art hand cut by Eddie Kalachi, who's a 77-year-old vet, and he cuts all these pieces that are framed behind you by hand with an X-Acto knife.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's like the for our, well, I mean, this is strictly audio only, but it is, what would you call this? Like shadow boxes?
Yeah, 3D cutout art.
There we go. Yeah. So you've got like the classic, you got Amazing Fantasy 15, where Spider-Man is looking like he's popping out of the panel or the cover. Now, that's pretty badass. Yeah, you got some cool stuff in here. I want to turn the corner here and talk about the Kickstarter and what is you say it's your first independent creator-owned comic book, right?
Well, my first creator-owned comic that's mine that exists. Yeah, it's called The Adventures of Wyatt in Pouches.
I want to read to you the solicitation. Let's read the solicitation. I want you to add to it if there's anything missing. I doubt it because I'm sure that you're the one that wrote it. But just for our listeners at home, let me give them a level set. The Adventures of Wyatt in Pouches is a journey through the innocence of childhood and the wistful nostalgia of 1990s comic books. Think The Wonder Years meets Deadpool meets Calvin and Hobbes, which honestly you had me at that trifecta. A whimsical and introspective tale for all ages, 18 and plus. What else would you add to this solicitation to let people know what this story is about? And then I want to know, who are Wyatt and Pouches as characters? Like, where do they come from?
So this is a story of what happens when a 13-year-old kid has a fork in the road. Due to an accident that he was in, he finds himself the smartest room in any room that he walks into, with heightened, mental function and acumen. But he doesn't want to lose his sense of childhood. He doesn't want his friends to know that he's got these new abilities, so he pretends that he doesn't have them. So in order to maintain, his sense of being a 13-year-old kid and having friends and being able to play, he has to confide in somebody. So he actually had written his own comic book before this happened to him. And Pouches was the main character of his book. So now he forms this kind of Calvin and Hobbes relationship with Pouches. And most of every book is a fantastical journey that they're on together. But Pouches is imaginary. Wyatt is not.
So the Kickstarter is for issue 1, right? Issue 1's got 2 stories in it.
Yes, it does. It's got one written by me and one written by Stephen Rollberg, who you might know. He used to work over at Mythical.
Oh, man. I have not heard that name in a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Very
awesome.
exciting for both.
Well, I'm glad. I'm definitely glad I backed it. And it's illustrated by
C. Michael Lanning.
Tell me a little about C. Michael Lanning. How'd you connect?
C. Michael Lanning, I met in a creator group. So it might even be one that I had asked you for local creator groups back in the day, and I added myself to a couple of them. But I've seen his work, and I really liked it. And I hate to say this, but I had somebody in mind for the book, and they are going through stuff with family, and they're working on another book, and I couldn't have my number one choice, so I took the best person for the job that wasn't my first pick.
There we go.
Which is C. Michael Lanning.
That's just how it works out sometimes. And for our listeners, the episode artwork for this episode is an example of that artwork. But I got Earthworm Jim vibes. Like that cartoony, it's fun, animated kind of look to it.
Absolutely. So there's more than a couple of people have told me when they saw the artwork, they're like, oh, it's an all ages book, right? And it's not. I wanted the pages in the artwork to be fun. And I knew that there was a certain amount of people that would see it and think, oh, that's a kid's book. It's, for one, it's absolutely not a kid's book, but a kid could read it.
Okay.
The same way, they could read a Sunday morning cartoon, you know what I mean? Like non sequitur, but they're not going to get the jokes. You know what I mean? So, at the risk of people but if somebody looks at something and without reading a single panel and they write it off as a kid's book, I don't want them as a reader anyways. You know what I mean? So you judge the book by its first panel?
Yeah, I don't need you, buddy. Okay. I think I might have mentioned already, but the Kickstarter has already met its goal. I think
it met its goal in 3 minutes.
Yeah, it was a very humble goal, too. I understand that you guys were really just trying to raise funds to get the book made and then also to pay the colorist, Samuel Diaz, right?
Correct.
You guys had already finished the book. It was good, which I do enjoy. Because sometimes you sign up for a Kickstarter and you're like, all right, where's it at in this process? And it's like, well, I just came up with this idea and I have not hired anyone to draw it, write it. But you guys were like, hey, we're already done. We just need a little help to get past the finish line.
I've definitely seen that.
And what you got was a whole defensive line pushing you towards past the touchdown field into the damn stadium.
Right. We just need the field goal at this point. So, and we're going to win the game without it. You know what I mean?
All right, tell me about some of the perks, because you've already got the books. You already met the initial goal of getting the books made. What are some of the perks that...
So we've already unlocked everybody backing at a physical level is going to get a free hollow foil sticker. It started out as a regular sticker if we got to $1,000. If we get to $2,000, it would be a hollow foil sticker because they're a little more expensive to make than it was. If we get to this much, it would be a trading card. And now it's going to be 2 trading cards. And we're going to have the Hulk 181 cover as a magnet is going to be unlocked. The only stretch goal we have left is the $12,000 stretch goal, and we're a little over 10,500 right now. And if we hit 12,000, then everybody that bought the collector's box is going to get the challenge coin for free.
The challenge coin looks lovely, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a nice gold-plated coin, double-sided. It's got Pouch Man on one side.
It's pouches.
I'm sorry, pouches. Sorry. Oh, and we'll get into that, by the way. That was a Freudian slip we'll get to. But it's got pouches on one side and Bossy the Cowabunga.
The logo for Cowabunga Comics.
Yeah, it's a good-looking challenge coin.
I appreciate that. So, yeah, the challenge coins, not only are they cool, but they're more than twice the size that I thought they would be. They're so big, dude.
They look like one of those... They look like one of those collector coins that you see in the commercials where they're like, only for a limited time now, and free shipping and handling. And you're like, damn, it's made out of pure gold. Yeah.
But it looks like it would be like a $40 or $50 thing.
Yeah, it's a nice,
you know what I mean?
It's a nice touch.
I got them for a great price. And I'm excited. I can't wait to unlock the stretch goals so I can put them in everybody's box.
How many Kickstarters have you done before? Is this your first one?
Well, I did one for artwork. It was called Cosplay Character Commissions, and it was basically, you know how I do the collage paintings where I'll put the comic book pages down on canvas and paint a character over the top of it. It was basically for cosplayers that have a photo of them that they really, really liked, and I would put the pages down of whatever that character was, and I would paint them on the canvas. And it was successful, but it wasn't by any means a project like this. And it wasn't even something maybe did even really belong on Kickstarter, because it wasn't like I needed the funds to, you know what I mean? I just wanted to be a part of Kickstarter. So this is the first comic book that I put on Kickstarter, and it's the I had one for my trading cards that did not meet its goal. So it's technically the third campaign that I've ever made on Kickstarter.
Okay. Well, I was trying to figure out if maybe you've done plenty of Kickstarters and you're leveraging that experience and that's why it's so successful. But I guess help me out here.
Well, I have backed over 180 campaigns. So I know you've gotten these emails saying that somebody that you know backed such and such a campaign.
Yes.
They've got some metric where it knows who's crossed the streams and who knows each other. And I think that has definitely helped. But I didn't go back and spam every person that I ever supported. But I do think that when I went to launch, somebody that you backed got an email.
Got it.
Hey, he's getting ready to go live with this, you know.
So it sounds like a case of you were giving and supporting so much, it kind of came back to you. You know how they say, like, sometimes you put the good in the world and it comes back to you?
Absolutely.
I'm not surprised that you've already met the goal, that the campaign is successful. You know, whether you hit any more stretch goals, which I'm sure you will or not. I was not surprised that it was successful because, like I said, you dabble in so many different hustles and corners of the comic universe that I can imagine that you have met so many people, you've helped so many people, you've probably been involved, and what I'm saying, like your name, your name's got some weight to it. So when you make an announcement like, "Hey, I've got a project going on," I think you have gotten so many people, in your corner that, I can imagine people like, "Hell yeah, I'm a,
well,
support the
how
campaign."
lucky am I that I've been able to help other people on their journey, and then also they circle back and help me be successful on the next stage of mine. I mean, I feel like I'm one of the most blessed people on the planet, dude.
Yeah, I like that attitude, man. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room and my little slip here. I was talking to Trey the other week, and I brought up the Kickstarter. I was like, I'm going to be interviewing Kyle, finally get him on the pod. Want to talk about the Kickstarter. Wyatt and Pouches looks really fun. And I was telling him, I was like, yeah, it's kind of cool that he ran with this idea, this Pouchman idea from Liefeld. And he corrected me, like a good friend should. He was like, whoa, hold up.
That's Trey.
He was like, nah. Contrary to whatever the internet may say, Kyle's Pouches precedes the infamous Rob Liefeld Pouchman, which he did as a kind of a meta joke about all the pouches that we used to draw on cable. I think it was just like a cover that he put out of this original pouch character, and I think it was a couple of years ago, but it
was 2018.
All right, you know what, I'm just going to ask you for the story, because it sounds like just the way you answered that, you've already had to explain this plenty of times. So give it to us on the podcast.
I had that answer ready like a katana. Boom. Do you remember Joe Peace?
Joe Peace.
Joe Peace was that dude. He was like, it looked like he's a over-the-hill rock star, and he would run shows at the local Holiday Inns and Ramadas called the Comic Book Connection Show. It's $5 to get in, and you get 10 free comics in a yellow bag, right? So he used to throw these shows, and it was like going to a show at a local hotel, but there's only one vendor because he had a tractor trailer full of stuff. So I went to one of them, and I was like, hey, looks like you need an artist to set up and sell their art. He's like, yeah, you know anybody? And I was like, yeah, I'm your man. When's your next show?
You're like, I start tomorrow.
So back in 2014, 2015, I started setting up at his shows and selling my art and prints and originals and whatnot. And I was at one of these shows waiting for doors to open. And I took a comic book backboard and I started doodling on it. And I drew a picture of Pouches. And when I put it on Instagram, I said, summoning the creative vibes of comic book legend Rob Liefeld. Pouches is made completely out of tactical pouches with big guns, or something like what he lacks in feet, he makes up in big guns. You know what I mean? And Rob even commented on it with a LOL, And I started developing that character and fleshing him out. It was just a cheesy little doodle, right? But I started over the years following, fleshing him out, and I came up with Wyatt, and I, rolling around. But I didn't know anything about comics, and I wanted to learn from other people that make comics before I tried to write my own. Because as a writer, I was dealing with the burden of knowledge. And then in 2018, I started getting people would tag me that knew that I was developing this character in posts by Rob, where he was like, "Oh, introducing the pouch."
That's right.
Created by Rob, And I was like, "Oh, that's cute." He's doing his own version. I was like, mine was inspired by him, so what does it matter, But then when he printed it on the cover of Bloodstrike Brutalists number 23, I kind of went, "What?" And a couple of my friends were like, "Yo, that's messed up. You need to do something." I'm like, "What am I going to do?"
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the top of a mountain and yell,
Yeah, it's a few things, right? It's like, one is Rob Liefeld. It's,
right.
Like hard stop. And then second, like you said, it's an interesting conundrum because he inspired you, and that, it's like a weird snake eating its tail type thing.
So I reached out to Rich Johnston from Bleeding Cool.
Wow.
And I was like, yo, I think this dude copied my homework. And he was like, well, give me the receipts. So I showed him the post where I had March 8th, 2015. And anyone who wants to scroll back and see and check it. And I showed him the post where Rob had commented and told him that I was writing this book, which it had a different name. I was going to call it On My Honor. I think On My Honor is going to be the subtitle of a future issue. Anyways. So he's like, oh, cool. Looks like you got something here. Let me reach out to Rob for comment. So he reaches out to Rob, and Rob's like, yeah, I never heard of this guy. And Rich is like, well, what about this post 3 years ago where you commented on his thing? And he's like, he gets all mad. He can do whatever he wants.
He probably talk shit about you on his podcast.
Who knows?
Your name was definitely said on the podcast.
He has a podcast?
Oh yeah, it's called Robservations.
Well, of course,
and I think every episode he kind of retells like a period of comics, during his days, and he'll give like comic history. I've heard it's a really good podcast. I've heard it's, he's got a solid following, but it's also Rob Liefeld, right? Like, of course he does.
But after the Bleeding Cool did their Separated at Birth article, I never saw the pouch ever again, right? For good reason, I assume.
That sounds like a silent W right there. That was a silent win for you.
It definitely has been a silent W for a few years.
Well, let me ask you, how many people have backed? Have you had anyone back the Kickstarter or the campaign and reached out like, hey, this isn't what is this? This isn't the pouch. Have you had any of that?
Well,
or has it worked in your favor?
When I've had the character on my table at conventions, it's definitely a conversation starter. They're like, "Oh, is that Rob's character?" I'm like, "No, it's my character. Rob saw it and did his own version."
That's why you're so good at telling the story.
So, the campaign's live. We meet the goal. It's like 2 or 3 days in, and I post one of the covers in comic book group on Facebook. And I was like, summoning that 90s nostalgia with segmented metal arms and cybernetic eyes and a character made completely out of pouches. Am I doing it right? And then I posted it, and then the first comment, I put a link to the Kickstarter. And then the next day, Rob sees my post, and he comments on my post with image comments with every cover of Bloodstrike Brutalist 23, all the variant covers with his character on it. Then he makes his own post in comic book group, which I've never seen him post in there before, saying, created 2017, The Pouch by Rob Liefeld, established 2017. And everybody's commenting on it. And I was like, well, I mean, he said it right there, 2017. Like, my timestamp's still on my post, 2015. Like, this is a dumb argument because he inspired me to create the character in the first place. But for him to come in, knowing he's got the fan base that he does, trying to, like, shit on me like that, I'm just like, what?
It's like, Rob, I'm the last person you need to worry about, buddy. I'm just trying to do my thing over here.
And you know what? Even, like, right in this moment, if he walked through the door, I would probably kiss him on the mouth. Because so many people saw the interaction between me and him, and they're like, well, I mean, they look at the timestamp and they're like, he's saying he came, and then Rob posted and then he's got his own extreme group, and he posted a picture of just a pouch that he drew, that someone requested him to draw on a sketch cover in 2009. No eyes, no face, no limbs or anything. And he was like, see, this is first 2009. So he keeps moving the goalpost. He's either trolling for fun, or he Rob is doing for me the work that no marketing firm could.
I was just about to say, I like that you realize this is kind of a stupid ass argument, but at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, if you want to drag this out, thank you for helping me sell these books.
I definitely feel like I owe him an extreme gift basket.
I want to go back to, you mentioned something about conventions and setting up. I know that I mentioned in the intro, you are at just about every worthwhile and major convention. I mean, you go to San Diego Comic-Con pretty regularly. You're going to be at New York Comic-Con. But what else is a regular for you? Heroes Con you were at?
Yes, I was there. That was the first time that I had set up. So up until June of last year, not last June, but June of last year, I only stuck to like St. Mary's, Georgia, and Florida conventions. And then I'm standing in line at this coffee shop, Spring Park Coffee, across the street. And I get a call from Rich, the showrunner from MegaCon. And he's like, yo, you want a booth? And I was like, yeah, y'all are sold out. He's like, I'm in charge. You want a booth? And I'm like, yeah. So he called me and hooked me up with a booth. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then shortly after, I got called by Brooklyn Comic Con. And they're like, hey, we want to fly you out here as a guest with Phil Lamar. And I kind of like, I looked left to right, like, well, what? I'm Kyle Willis. I'm like, I'm nobody. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? And
what do you think it was that they saw? Was it a cover you did?
So it turns out, I asked him when I got up there, and we hit it off really well. And it turns out, I was like, so what made you reach out to me in the first place? I had to know. And they're like, when we did our online con through the COVID, we reached out to people who we followed their work and asked them if they would participate. And you were one of the few that said, yeah. Which goes back to what I said earlier about, so I'll say, yeah, if I like the cut of your jib, we'll work together again, So saying yes to somebody that maybe didn't have a big following, came back when they did have the following and they were putting on their own actual show. They're like, let's get this dude,
That's cool.
And they flew me and Nick Justice were the two artist guests out there.
Well, I want to know, what piece of advice would you give someone that that is either going to that wants to do the convention hustle or is doing the convention hustle? How do you keep from getting burnt out? Like, what is the best practices when it comes to like ensuring that you're not wasting your time and resources?
Well, that's a trick question because you're not going to be successful as an artist unless you're one in a million without getting a little burnt out. So my suggestion would be the opposite of the question, which would be do as many local small craft shows and art shows and comic book shows as you can and scale up from there. When you're not going to do MegaCon's not going to be your first show. San Diego's not going to be your first show. Work a couple local shows until you figure out what your booth is supposed to look like and switch up how your booth looks from show to show. So you know how to understand the potential of the real estate of your tabletop. And what works if you do trading cards and you do glass prints and you got little baubles over there and the trading cards do really well, but you didn't sell a single one of those other prints, maybe double up the size of the trading card. You know what I mean? And then go from there because you don't want to spend $800 to $1,500 to participate in a MegaCon and an artist alley to be drowned out because you didn't know what your table was supposed to look like and you didn't know how to handle. So start small, do as many as you can, get burnt out. Getting burnt out, take that energy when you stop doing shows for a little while, put it back into your art. Go into the studio, all burnt to a crisp, and put it into your art. Put that energy into your art. That exhaustion and that despair is going to make you make better art because you're going to be hungry for it. You're either going to quit and you're going to go back to your full-time job, or you're going to go hard.
Kyle, you are a wild man. You sound like a madman that thrives on like pushing yourself to the limit, because that is, I want to say that is the opposite of what a lot of people would say, but I think people would be very cautious in telling someone to like push themselves to that limit. But for you, it sounds like you live in that world of like busyness and hustle and having to push yourself and fail. It sounds like you're not afraid of failure.
The failing is what's gotten every milestone I ever achieved, and every little bit better that I got is because I did it and it sucked in one way or another.
I want to talk about your signature art style. You mentioned that you have a lot of prints where you do the collages. You know, you'll chop up comic pages and panels and have that as a background, and then you'll draw like a character in front that relates to whatever pages and panels. I'm not going to say that's your piece was the first time I had seen that done, but I think it was the first time I had seen that adopted as a style consistently. You know, when I would see your work at like Art Walk or some of these art markets, like you combined, like in particular, one piece of art I bought from you was a print, and it was a Norman Rockwell piece of an electrician on a pole. Maybe not an electrician, but a flagpole. A worker on a flagpole.
It was Spider-Man.
And it was Spider-Man.
The original painting is called Gilding the Eagle, and it's a painting that he had. An old man was at the top of the flagpole where the golden eagle is, and it had rusted, and the man was painting it. So I actually did that piece with Photoshop. I got rid of the old man. I put Spider-Man in there. I took several composite photos of cosplayers that I had taken photos with over the years.
Oh, cool.
And I photoshopped Spider-Man in there with his camera, kind of doing like a peace sign, or I can't remember what he was doing something like, doing one of these numbers.
I think he was giving a thumbs up, but you've got a lot of pieces like that where you've either combine a fine art famous piece with like comic book elements and it looks seamless, or you're saying like the collages. And I think even earlier than that, when I was first going into Gotham City Limit, you were doing a lot of epoxy tables for him, where you were taking that collage style and making like tables.
I was showing somebody else how to do that. So I had done a couple of them, and my buddy Jeff knew about it. And he's like, hey, I got this space. My grandma passed away, and her house is in probate right now. So while they figure out her estate, I can use the house, the garage, to make these tables. And then you should come over and show me how to do it. So I made a bunch of them with him, and we sold 2 or 3 of them to Ben, and we split the money. It was awesome. Yeah, but what's different with the ones that I made than when other people do them is I painted on it before we covered them with the epoxy. So we put the comic book pages down with the wallpaper paste, let it dry. Then I painted, the Batman on one of them, and then we coated it, and it looks really, really cool.
Well, I guess what I want to know is what came first? Is it at the base, were you a fine arts fan?
So this is what happened.
Comics?
When I came to Jacksonville and I tried to introduce myself to this city, and I was met with these, this is what it costs to be a member emails. I realized, because a lot of what I do is pop culture, and no matter what you're doing it and what medium you're doing it, if you're painting something from pop culture, they call it fan art. And I noticed a lot of people in the fine art world look down their nose at fan art and they call it lowbrow. So I was like, all right, bet. I took it as a challenge. So everything I do, I try to bridge the gap between fan art and fine art. So when you come into my shop and you see a mosaic, it's on a gallery wrapped 18 by 24 canvas, and there are over 4,000 pieces of comic book pages cut up and assembled to make Venom. There's no denying the skill that's in that piece. I can confidently say that about my own piece. Love it or hate it, you gotta respect. That's fine art right there. I don't care what side of the train tracks you're from.
I think when you look at one of your original pieces, you definitely appreciate the amount of skill and like, oh no, this isn't a fly by night. This isn't just he didn't just draw Venom or whatnot or paint Venom. Right. It's like, no, there's some nuance to it. There's layers. And you could definitely tell me, like, no, that took some effort. That took some
There's a piece I did
effort.
for a creator-owned title called Final Boss by Tyler Kirkham. And the shop that hired me to do that piece, they couldn't be at the drop of the book, which was at Amazing Las Vegas back in like May or June or whatever. And they asked me, they're like, hey, if we fly you out there, will you go pick up the books? And I'm like, well, yeah, but why don't you just have them mail them to you? And they were like, because when you pick up your books, you get to go to this VIP party and you get a 10-minute stream. You can stream with Tyler Kirkham and talk about your book.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And I was like, buy my tickets. So they flew me out there. And I went to Amazing Las Vegas and I went to the VIP party and I got 10 minutes. So I had to log in to the Kiss Comics account and we went live and they were doing them back to back to back to back. So you had like no time to glad hand with them before or after the show. You just went live and then you sat down and the other guy gets up and you sit down. So I sit down from across from him and I hand him like 10 copies to sign and he's looking at it and he's seeing all the little pieces and he's like, oh, I remember this piece when we approved it. He's like, yeah, you did this in like Photoshop? And I was like, nah, man, that's a 18 by 24 inch canvas. I cut up 3 copies to issue 1 and cut the pieces up into thousands of little pieces to assemble them to make that picture for issue 2. And his brain melted. But the cool thing is we were live. So we had all the books in the Buy It Now. And he was like, wait, what? And he's like, you telling me there's an original somewhere? And I'm like, it's hanging in my shop in North Florida. He's like, I can't even grasp the magnitude. He's like, he didn't have words. It was so, and I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of smirking a little bit. I was like, well, thanks for the compliment, man. He's like, this is so many pay grade, so many levels above my pay grade. I can't even, this is fascinating. And then he starts stopping people and like some Tony Moy went to walk by and he stops Tony Moy. He's like, he made this with thousands of little pieces of, like he was like a little kid. He was like, he couldn't believe it. I got a real big kick out of that, man.
I thought you were going to tell me he was going to be like, wait, you cut up my comic book, you asshole?
Once you sell it, you got no ties to what happens to it.
Do you have a piece, like do you have an original art piece or commission that you regret selling?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
You answered that really quickly. You probably thought about this a lot.
It's one of my mosaic pieces, and it's the recreation of Batman 423, that cover by Todd McFarlane. I used to take it with me when I would work shows, if I would paint live, and I had a fuck you price on it. And the person who owns this building that we're sitting in right now was at one of these events when I was painting live, and he got a couple bottles of red wine in him, and he came over to me and handed me his metal Amex, and he was like, I gotta have it. And it's actually hanging in his office next door.
And that's one of the ones where you cut up a bunch of thousands of pieces.
Yeah. It's one of the most popular ones I've ever done. But I collected that book's foreign editions. So I had Batman 423 from, I think, 9 different countries, maybe more. The Hungarian edition, the Brazilian edition, the Greek, and I had that piece on my accent wall in my home, and all the foreign editions kind of encircled it. And it was really cool. And I couldn't tell him, no, that was just a fuck you price. I don't want to sell it. And I was just like, to me at the time, I was like, that's a lot of money. I got to take it,
Yeah, no, absolutely. How do you ensure that you make time for actually creating art, considering that, you've got a shop to run, you've got, online stores to do, and I'm sure plenty of fulfillment and, bookkeeping and all that. How do you ensure that you find time to create and do art?
Well, the only way I've been able to successfully do it is to give up a little. And what I mean by that is I built this place from scratch. This was something I did on the side in my in my dining room, and now it's become what it is. But I've basically given up the retail portion of this venture and let my wife run it. So I've got my home studio. I used to do it here. You see there's a little art desk on the other side of the room from where we're sitting. But now I stay home, and she comes in, and she's got the shop cat to keep her company now, Rescue, and she runs the retail side of the business. She does all the ordering so that I'm freed up and I can work on cover work and writing and travel. Oh my God, so much travel. This last year, I've traveled to so many shows. I worked San Diego Comic Con. I didn't even go inside the con. I was in the con for maybe an hour. I spent all my time at Hero House. I kind of treated Hero House like a co-working space. And I took a bunch of product with me that I had printed, and I gave streamer packs to all the streamers. And then we had a percentage split, so they all ran my stuff. So I took all this stuff out there, but then I didn't have to be responsible for shipping any of it. So it was kind of, everybody's like, man, you got, that's kind of a G move, bro. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't realize how well it would work out when I went there. So yeah, it was really cool.
Kyle, this might seem like we're taking like several steps back, but only because we hit such a good stride in the beginning. I kind of overlooked this question, but I normally like to ask this in the beginning anytime I do interviews, and that's, do you remember your first conscious exposure to comics, or the one that made you like a fan, like a lifelong fan? Like, is there a particular memory that comes to mind when you think of like early comic book exposure?
Yeah, it was Spider-Man. I met a kid, I was 12, he was 14. And I met him at church, and we started, you know how kids are. Hey, you want to hang out? And I was a little fat kid, right? So he lived about 1.5 miles away from a comic book shop. He's like, let's go to the comic book shop. And I'm like, where is it? He's like, right over here. Man, I wanted to kill him by the time we finally got there. 1.5 miles? What is that? I don't think I'd ever walked 1.5 miles.
I said I want to hang out, not exercise, you asshole.
But, and he would sit there and read the comics, and I could my mom was a street smart people person. So I could tell right away that the guy that owned that shop hated this kid, because he'd come in there, maybe he'd buy $5 worth of stuff, but he'd sit there for 4 hours reading the comics, But he had his own collection. So when I would go over and hang out at his house, I would read the books that he had in his PC. So he had a lot of his collection was DC. So, I got to read Nightfall and a bunch of DC stuff, but it was definitely the Spider-Man books that took me, and I started collecting Spider-Man. But McFarlane and Larson and the way they drew Spider-Man, I was very much in love with. But Todd McFarlane will always be my first comic book love, But Frazetta was the first artist that I was like, oh, wow, art can be for me. This isn't just for old stinky people. You know what I mean? It galas. This is something that I can get into. I saw Frazetta did the album cover for Flirtin' with Disaster and another album by Molly Hatchet. And that Death Dealer and that one, Flirtin' with Disaster is the one with the barbarian with the battle axe coming through the wall. Dude, that was so incredible.
Those images are bad. And you know what? McFarlane and Frazetta make so much sense for you being like big inspirations. 90s comics meets fine art is how I would definitely describe you, for sure. Like that image era. And yeah, man. And the fact that just kind of watching like your career and all, the success you've had in all these different spaces is really inspiring, man. Like, you definitely have worn a lot of hats, and it's cool to see like what you've built up, for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the compliment.
Is there anything else that you would share to an aspiring comic creator or artist that's listening that's like, man, I want to do what he's done. I want to have that success that he's done. Like, what advice would you give to like that aspiring artist or creator?
I would tell them to trust their instincts. I've made it a habit of, when I have an idea that I think is a super outside of the box idea, and I ask somebody for feedback and they're like, oh, that'll never work. I take that as a challenge and I'll do it. Just it's almost like the fuel that them telling me it couldn't be done is the fuel that I needed to go ahead and spend my energy making that thing come to life. Yeah. And ultimately every time it's been something that I'm proud of when I look back. So if you think you got an idea that might be a little bit bonkers, but you're excited about it, do it. And don't let anybody fucking talk you out of it.
Hell yeah. Solid piece of advice. From a retailer perspective, what is your opinion or feelings on the comic industry today? And I bring that up only because it feels like every other month, I'm especially like on Twitter and the online spaces that I'm in when it comes to comic book commentary and journalism. It feels like every other month there's a conversation to be had about Are comics dying? Is manga blowing it out the water? Are they going to push that out of the way? Like, what are your thoughts from a retailer perspective on the health of the comic book market?
I think that the discussion around manga outselling American comics to the point that it is and has been for over 20 years is the distraction that indie comics needed to completely outpace DC and Marvel. Now, a lot of people are saying that it's the woke culture or whatever that's killing comics. Comics are just the money that DC and Marvel are willing to put into their super profitable products isn't what it used to be, and it shows. So all those people, they're like, why would I go work for Marvel if they're not even going to pay this, that, or the other? So the indie comic scene, there's an uprising happening right now. But because it isn't like one publisher, it's millions of creators that are finding their space, and that slice of the pie taken by the indie community, it can't be quantified, so you can't make a pie chart out of it. So nobody realizes that indie comics is where it is at right now. You think comics are dying? Put that Marvel and DC book down and pick up an indie book written by a creator that you know and support them and break bread with them.
Damn, I just found the soundbite that I need for this intro. Well said, Kyle, and I love the intensity that you just had talking about indie creation, which brings me to one last thing I'm going to ask of you. So the Kickstarter is a success. You've obviously baked in extra copies that can be purchased and whatnot. Where can people find The Adventures of Wyatt and Pouches if they're hearing this and they're like, I got to support, I want a copy, I love Calvin Hobbes?
Well, the very next place you can find these two characters is in the preview of the book, the uncolored, unfinished book, printed as a preview that I will have at New York Comic Con.
Let's go.
But if you keep up with me, just go to artofkylewillis.com or Art of Kyle Willis on any social media platform, except for Snapchat. I'm 45 years old. You'll find my stuff and my updates.
Kyle, I love how self-aware you are, man. You're self-aware, you're honest, and I love it, man. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm glad we finally got to make it happen, man.
Me too, bro.
And I'm glad we got to do it out of Cowabunga Comics. Once again, if you are in the Northeast Florida area, do yourselves a favor, make a little day trip to Cowabunga Comics. Come see what Kyle's got going on. And if you're listening and you don't live in Jax or Florida, check out artofkylewillis.com. I should have mentioned at the top, links and previews and all of that are going to be linked in the show notes. The episode artwork is from The Adventures of Wyatt and Pouches, so we've got you covered. But that's the show we got for you today, Shortbox Nation. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, you know what you got to do. You got to make sure that you subscribe to the podcast if you're new to it. And if you're already subscribed, consider leaving a 5-star rating and review. Let us know if you enjoyed the show, and most importantly, let others know that this is a worthwhile podcast. Besides that, next week, well, I got to see what I got to see what type of interviews I can get out of New York Comic Con. This episode will come out the week of New York Comic Con, so next week I'll see if I got any interviews to drop, but I will have something new for all of you to tune in on. So just stay up to date with the podcast feed and, continue to make mine and your short box. I appreciate and love all of you. Peace.